Welcome to Chapter 9 of Death on Clare Island. Joyce, Shaw, Pierce, Yeats, and Bono have done a good job of creating an image of the Irish as intuitive, gifted, spiritual, and emotive. Perhaps the moderate client's alliance with nature encourages the instinctive earthliness. This morning, the 8 o'clock Mayo West radio show reported the temperature as 10 degrees Celsius. Doubling the 10 and then adding 30, I loosely translated to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The crisp air tickled my skin as my feet glided along. Ground fog, hovering at the foot of Nathan Mountain, shifted as elusively as a ghostly sprite. Both ends of a rainbow waned over its peak. Glancing around for someone to share the moment with and finding no one, I found myself missing Dylan. When I got back to the cottage, there was another message from Peter asking me to call him about our dinner. I hoped he wasn't going to end up being one of those needy guys who make a pest of themselves. While I was debating whether or not to call him back, the phone rang. I answered it, expecting to hear his voice. It wasn't him. "I'm sorry for your trouble," Father Mulligan would go on to say, "but we haven't kept records here since the fire in 1976. It was way before my time. But as far as I know, whatever survived was boxed up and sent to the General Register office in Dublin." "What about the National School, Father? Wouldn't you have records of students?" "The trouble is that everything was stored in Bunnacurry's church office before the fire. School records as well as those for marriage, birth, and death were destroyed. If you're looking for documents, your best bet would be the General Register office." Isn't it odd, I thought, that the year my mother disappeared, a fire destroyed those church records. I couldn't help wondering if fate conspired to erase any evidence of her spirit other than what remained in my soul. Not out long after the call with Father Mulligan, the phone rang again. This time it was Peter. "I just wanted to reconfirm tonight," he said. "Yes, I should be back from Clare Island in time." "You're coming to the island today?" He sounded surprised. "Yes, Bridget Sumner asked me to look into her brother's death," I told him. "She's not convinced that the police did all they could. I'm going to interview Richard O'Malley." Glancing at my watch, I realized I'd better end this call or I wouldn't be going anyway. "Look, I've got to go," I said. "Is there anything else?" "Just that I'll pick you up at 8:15 and thanks." I ended the call, cutting off whatever Peter said next. I breezed along the coast road to the Clare Island ferry as if the devil were at my heels, making it through the departure gate with just a few moments to spare. In the distance, shroud-like clouds covered Knockmore's summit. Shivering, I buttoned up my pink cardigan, remembering that Matthew wore high-top sneakers, a t-shirt, jacket, and jeans when his body washed ashore. Without rain gear and hiking boots, not even residents chose to walk along the edge of the island's cliff. Had he planned on climbing that more? If not, then why the nightly explorations? Maybe Richard O'Malley, a renowned historian, chronicler of the Cistercian monks' influence on the art and history of Ireland, and native of Clare Island, would provide these answers. As the ferry glided across the water, I made a reminder to check into the financial background of Save the People. I'd have to call my office later to give them the background for the search. I'd also call Susan Bell to request a copy of the public data for the organization's finances. I thought again about how much I missed access to digital databases. What did people do when they were disconnected this long? Once the ferry docked and we disembarked, I pulled a map out of my knapsack to reorient myself. I trekked past Knocknaveen, the smaller of the island's two mountains, toward the abbey, church, and cemetery, where legend says Grace O'Malley, the Pirate Queen, is buried. When she was alive, wherever Grace O'Malley went, she built a church for her loyal followers. Over 200 men rode the sea under her command. These men had wives and children who lived on the islands around Clue Bay. What secrets did Grace keep, I wondered. She plundered British ships and built churches for her followers. Wasn't there a contradiction in that? What if my mother and I were descended from this Irish warrior princess? I liked that idea. I walked along the road from the bay to the abbey in 45 minutes, noticing a small shop and pub with the name, of course, O'Malley. It was printed on the sign that hung over the door. New homes shared the landscape with so many old structures, including the lighthouse, Grace O'Malley's tower lookout, stone cairns and bogs, mixing 21st century progress with the island's ageless wonder. The island church was small and simple, embracing its altar and kneelers. It was also empty. I lingered for a few minutes, remembering the many times my mother and I attended Our Lady of Angels Church in the Bronx. She always lit 3 candles. "Keep your eyes on the altar, Star," she'd say, and she'd scold me whenever I fidgeted. I asked her once about the 3 candles. She smiled and said, "It's a light for the one who's not here." I don't know who she might have meant, but I've held her sentiment in my mind for a long time, imagining and believing that the light was for my father, and that we were separated for good reasons. But she never explained. The O'Briens and I attended Mass regularly, but once they were gone, I stopped. It's not that I don't believe in God, it's that I don't think He's in churches. I like to think He's in the people and the angels we meet along our journey. I left my memories behind and ventured around the back of the church. There was a graveyard and the half-standing remains of what once must have been the monks' abbey. Over to its right, a sign indicated to tourists that they perused the former abbey's sacristy. I lowered my head and crept cautiously into the small, stone-encased room. There was a man kneeling in front of a wall, like a monk lying prone in a moment of supplication before an altar. When my eyes finally adjusted to the dim light, I realized that he wielded a fine brush similar in size and shape to a child's toothbrush in his right hand. Using tracing paper, he went over and over the faint, ethereal lines of the hunting and wildlife scenes depicted on the wall. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "Can you tell me where I might find Richard O'Malley?" I inched my way even further into the claustrophobic space where the Abbey's former inhabitants donned robes and prepared to celebrate rituals. The man who turned to me was stocky and of medium build. I would also describe him as a smaller version of what I'd always imagined Friar Tuck might look like. A curly brown beard enveloped his face, which smiled up at me. The smile extended to his dark brown eyes. "O'Malley here," he said jovially. "You're Richard O'Malley?" I stared at the sandals he wore in the midst of the rubble. "Well, I'm definitely not the abbot," he replied, beginning to set his brush into a leather pouch that he excavated from the depths of his Carhartt overalls. "Who are you?" "I'm Star O'Brien. Bridget Sumner hired me to investigate her brother's death. I'd like to ask you a few questions if you don't mind." "Aye, no problem." O'Malley's laughing brown eyes lost some of their glow. I could tell right away that this was a painful topic for him. "Just give me a moment," he said. He brushed off his hands, jumped to his feet, and motioned me to lead the way back out into the sunlight. Then he led me toward the stone wall that surrounded the Abbey's graveyard. It's a very sad thing that happened to Matthew, he began softly. I felt like he was one of me own. I smiled, noticing O'Malley's use of the word me instead of my. One of those ways of speaking that the Irish have. He continued, enormous talent that lad had. At times, it struck me that the original monks had crossed over into Matthew's hands and mind. His work was that good. I'm positive he would have received awards for his efforts here when it was completed. O'Malley's voice quivered as he gazed toward the water that washed against the rocky shore. Were you on the island the day he died? I asked. I was indeed, but I didn't see him. O'Malley paused before continuing. I had a mountainous folder of paperwork related to the project's grant money that had to be completed. So I spent the day at home in my cottage filling out forms and cursing bureaucracy. Okay, so what do you think happened to him? Well, he was the victim of foul play, of course. Or it could have been a terrible accident, but these rumors about drugs are gossip and nothing else. A bunch of ignorant people with nothing good to say about anyone, even themselves. He twisted abruptly and spat over the wall. You're not Irish, are you, Star? No, I was born in the United States. I couldn't help wondering what was behind this question. No harm in that. You see, you need to understand that the people here are willing to believe the worst of a person if that person is in any way different from them. And Matthew looked different. Like all artists, he experimented on himself. He sometimes wore a ring in his ear, dyed his hair all the colors of the rainbow, and had jewelry dangling from his belly button. Just recently, he inked his body with tattoos of classic art. I nodded, having glimpsed the edge of a tattoo through the wet strands of hair that clung to his neck. I'm telling you, though, O'Malley said, he was a fine lad where it mattered most. Had his behavior changed before his death? Well, I'd say so. He'd become quieter and more impatient. Now his work hadn't suffered. That was still as good as ever. But he didn't joke around like he used to, and he took to going for long walks in the evening around the harbor. He also kept records of the tides, as if he expected something to happen. Did you ask him about it? I did. He told me he absorbed the spirits and history of the area, imagining what it was like to be a monk living on a remote island, alone and close to nature, but well-fed and educated. O'Malley paused to shift his weight against the wall's sharp stones. Richard, Matthew would say, the waters around this island are not as pure as they look. They wash away the secrets of many sinners. What kinds of sinners? I asked. O'Malley shook his head. I don't know, lass, and I didn't pry. What do you know about his time with Save the People? I asked as I laid my heavy knapsack on the ground. Not much, other than he had a knack for working with teenagers. Some of them used to visit the island, and to tell you the truth, I had no desire to know anything more about Matthew or any of his visitors. I'm mindful of me own business, and so should you be. Seeing the puzzled look on my face, he continued. Drugs kill people, that's the bottom line. Matthew might have crossed the path of some tourists involved with narcotics. People use the isolation and solitude of this island to experiment. Or he might have simply fallen from the cliffs. Having grown up on the island, I know the dangers better than anyone. I wouldn't venture around the coves or the cliff edges after night. Anything is possible. O'Malley's voice dwindled into silence, and shaking his body, he then said, I'm going to have a bit of lunch. Would you care to join me? He gestured to a knapsack perched on one of the carved stones that was covering a grave. Glancing at my watch, I realized I didn't have much time before the last ferry of the day returned to the mainland.